Across Africa, a storm is rising. 10 nations, from Nigeria to Kenya, South Africa to Ghana, Egypt to Tanzania, Algeria, Angola, Ethiopia, and Senegal, have just delivered a message that shook Washington to its core. Africa is done being the world's resource colony. For decades, the United States and its Western allies poured trillions into Africa, investments that looked like aid, but operated like control. But today, those same nations are saying no more. In less than 24 hours, a coordinated decision across multiple African capitals sent shockwaves through Wall Street, blocking or renegotiating more than $7.5 trillion in U.S. and Western corporate assets. This wasn't a random act. It was a calculated strike, a direct response to decades of economic manipulation, the kind that left Africa rich in minerals but poor in power. And it started when President Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso called for a complete economic liberation of Africa. His words echoed across the continent, and something historic began. Leaders from Nigeria, Ghana, and South Africa began reviewing U.S. energy contracts. Kenya and Ethiopia restructured agricultural deals. Angola and Algeria froze oil licensing to American companies pending national interest reviews. In one move, Africa pulled the brakes on U.S. dominance. Because here's the truth. For years, the United States saw Africa as an investment ground, but never a partner. America's corporations, Chevron, ExxonMobil, Cargill, J.P. Morgan, and Goldman Sachs, all operated across the continent, controlling pipelines, gold mines, and financial flows. But when African nations realized that most of those profits were leaving the continent, the illusion shattered. Imagine this. Africa supplies over 40% of the world's raw materials, yet holds barely 3% of global wealth. That's not coincidence, that's design. So what changed? Unity. For the first time in modern history, Africa's leaders are acting as one. Under the African Continental Free Trade Area, AfCFTA, the world's largest free trade zone, over 1.4 billion people and a $3.4 trillion market have come together. That means no more middlemen. No more dependency. No more waiting for Washington's approval. But the shocker? This $7.5 trillion standoff isn't just about money. It's about power. Because when Africa moved, the US dollar shook. Across the continent, central banks from Nigeria to Kenya began shifting their reserves away from the dollar, instead trading in yuan, gold, and local currencies. Zimbabwe launched a gold-backed currency. South Africa and Egypt doubled down on BRICS trade. Suddenly, Africa wasn't begging for IMF loans. It was building its own financial ecosystem. The United States, once the master of global finance, is now watching its influence crumble from the ground up. And it's not just about politics, it's math. The numbers don't lie. Africa's combined GDP is now over $3.2 trillion, growing faster than any region on Earth. By 2030, that number is projected to hit $5 trillion. By 2050, $10 trillion. While the U.S. economy struggles with inflation, debt ceilings, and political gridlock, Africa is building cities, power plants, and digital economies. In Nigeria, Dangote Refinery, the largest in Africa, just began operations, ending decades of oil import dependency. In Kenya, new tech cities like Konza Technopolis are becoming Africa's Silicon Valley. In Egypt, a futuristic new capital is rising from the desert, built by African hands, financed by Gulf and Asian investors, not Western loans. Across the Congo Basin, Africa is constructing hydropower plants that will power millions, while the West still debates over carbon emissions. And in Ghana, lithium mines once signed away to Western firms are now being reclaimed and restructured to give 51% ownership back to the country. But the real twist came when China and BRICS stepped in, offering Africa what the West never did: respect. Under new BRICS agreements, African nations are now trading directly with global giants, bypassing the U.S. dollar entirely. In 2024 alone, Africa signed $200 billion in new infrastructure and energy deals, none of them denominated in dollars. That move sent Wall Street reeling, because every dollar not used abroad weakens America's global leverage. Washington tried to respond. Diplomats rushed to Africa with new offers, renewed partnerships, and promises of mutual respect. But it was too late. When leaders like Traoré, Assimi Goïta, and Mohamed Bazoum's successors stood firm against Western intimidation, the balance shifted forever. Africa realized something powerful. Control is worth more than cash. And the people felt it too. From Lagos to Lusaka, from Dakar to Addis Ababa, the message was clear. We are not your investment ground. We are your competition. Across social media, a new narrative took over. Africa rising, the West declining. Hashtags like hashtag Africa rising, hashtag New World Order, and hashtag We Own Our Resources trended globally. And even in Western capitals, analysts began to admit, Africa isn't just a player. It's becoming the referee in global economics. Meanwhile, in Washington, panic set in. As U.S. companies saw their access shrinking, investors began pulling out billions. The dollar index dipped. Energy futures trembled. And by mid-2025, multiple think tanks warned. If Africa fully de-dollarizes, America's financial dominance could collapse within a decade. Because here's the new reality. Africa controls over 60% of the world's cobalt, 90% of its platinum, and 30% of its gold reserves. These are the ingredients for batteries, semiconductors, and clean energy. In short, Africa now holds the keys to the future economy. So when 10 African nations said no to $7.5 trillion in U.S. investments, they weren't turning away opportunity. They were demanding ownership. Today, Western corporations are scrambling to renegotiate terms. Mining contracts once signed under colonial pressure are being rewritten. Oil licenses once held by ExxonMobil and TotalEnergies are being rebidded with African priorities first. And for the first time in modern history, African investors are leading the charge, not following it. But let's be clear, this is not anti-West. It's pro-Africa. The continent is no longer waiting to be helped. It's leading the conversation. With AfCFTA, Africa has created the largest single market in human history. With BRICS, it's building new trade bridges. And with its 1.4 billion people, mostly under 25, it's unleashing a wave of innovation the world has never seen. While America faces division, debt, and decline, Africa is united, ambitious, and on the rise. In the next decade, Africa will host 6 of the world's 10 fastest-growing economies. It will double its middle class. It will dominate renewable energy and electric vehicles. And yes, it will become the backbone of global trade. So when people ask, how did Africa fight back for $7.5 trillion? The answer is simple. They didn't fight with weapons. They fought with strategy, unity, and belief. They built their own systems. They invested in their own people. And they stopped letting outsiders define their destiny. This is more than economics. It's a revolution. A silent, strategic, unstoppable African revolution, one that the West never saw coming. And as Washington scrambles to respond, one truth is clear. The world's economic map has been redrawn, and at the center of it now stands Africa.